So at 6:37, I think we should probably call this brief POCD subcommittee meeting to order. And I do not have the agenda in front of me, so let me just pull that up. But we have one main order of business tonight, which is to approve the list of projects that we are going to recommend to the Board of Selectmen for projects that align with the POCD and fit the guidelines of the American Relief Funds. So that kind of falls under our old business prioritization of recommendations. So that's what we're here to do tonight. So we had discussed, if you remember, our last meeting was over Zoom, and we had Mark Salerno give us an update on what the Board of Selectmen had already approved as part of those relief funds. He also let us know what some other towns in the region were using their funds for, and he talked through with us the kind of the qualifications or the rules around what we could spend that money on. And then we went through the POCD and kind of, as a group, identified a number of projects that we thought might be priority projects that also fit that bill. So I'm going to go through the list that we had identified kind of throughout the meeting. And just as a caveat, as we discussed at our last meeting, this is not necessarily kind of an overall priority list. It's a priority list of projects that fit those qualifications that this federal money requires us to be within. So Gary and I kind of went through our notes together today and had come up with 7 projects in the POCD that fit those qualifications. So I'm just going to go through them, read them to you now, and then we can have discussion, see if that's what everyone else recalls, and then I would love to kind of bring it to a vote so that we can put it in a formalized document and send it over to the Board of Selectmen in a communication. So the first one was related to information technology, and that was a GIS and IT infrastructure needs assessment and potential related upgrades. We talked about this. We talked about Waterford using some of their funds for GIS mapping. We talked about the potential for GIS to allow us to install some additional wayfinding signage tied to upgrades to that mapping. So that was number 1, GIS and IT infrastructure needs assessment. The second one was to recommend some of those infrastructure projects as identified in the Stantec Coastal Resiliency Study to improve health and safety in flood-prone areas of town. And a lot of those recommendations, if you remember from the study, also address flood-prone areas where the town has critical infrastructure, mostly water and sewer infrastructure, but others as well, and it identifies some safety hazards too in flood-prone areas that would cut off access and egress. The third one was a municipal seminar for residents on best practices in lawn care, like an educational program. We talked about this from a public health perspective in terms of health effects related to the incorrect application of lawn products, but also as it relates to the town's overall public health in terms of water quality. And our ability to improve water quality by educating our residents on the appropriate applications of lawn care products. We identified the potential for sewer and water infrastructure upgrades. For instance, there are some previously identified neighborhoods that were kind of, we've talked about them as ticket holders for sewer expansion to protect public health through water quality and impacts of septic systems in those neighborhoods. This also kind of ties into that Stantec study when it talks about projects to protect critical infrastructure in flooding zones. And we had identified, just as a note on this, that energy efficiency upgrades to that type of infrastructure be included if we're thinking about doing a project. So, if we're going to make an upgrade to a pump station, can we also, add solar, things like that. Number 5 was a needs assessment for the library space and kind of shared spaces that potentially relate to the library. I think you remember Larry discussing, the potential for kind of innovator space or a way to redo that front section. So this would be to recommend a needs assessment for the library and like shared spaces. The next one was EV charging stations, which we identified would support economic development through creating additional transportation opportunities in our commercial districts and support public health and improved air quality by encouraging electric vehicle usage. And then the last one was solar panel projects. Solar panel projects on existing buildings or over existing or proposed parking lots. So to be clear, we are highly discouraging the use of undeveloped land for the installation of solar or wind farms or the like, but we are recommending that we seek opportunities to install solar arrays on existing impervious surfaces, whether that's a large roof or to create covered parking over a parking lot. This fits into those qualifications for the spend through promoting economic development, through the potential for additional revenue streams through solar lease space, supporting public health through electrification of the grid and its impact to air quality, and also supporting public health when it comes to parking lots by reducing the need for road salt during winter weather, which has been having an impact on water supply. So
the other would be water temp.
Water temp, yeah, you're right.
You would have on your first flush, you'd have warm water running off those panels, but water temp could also be reduced potentially.
Yeah. So those were the projects as Gary and I remember from our notes. Let's have some discussion about whether or not that accurately represents what you were hoping would be in this list, or if we've missed something.
I guess the museum would be on wouldn't be on the list of items for the on the American Rescue Plan.
I remember that we talked about a historic properties museum, but I don't recall that we found a way to fit it into there. I remember we talked about it as we were going through, because we were looking at kind of several priority lists at once. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it as something to bring forward. But what I recall from my notes was that we couldn't draw the connection to the requirements of the federal spend. I don't know if anyone remembers if we did find a way to include it. Okay.
Well, Mark Nickerson told me that was the case, that you wouldn't qualify.
Right. Okay.
What the walk paths through town, people want the bike trail on the side of the road. Is that it? That was a big survey, right? Connecting, say, Flanders to downtown and then out to like Rocky Neck.
Yeah.
We did discuss that. I think Mark was not certain, like sidewalks qualify, although they provide connectivity and they're equitable in that they're for everyone. It's also a transportation sustainability practice. So I think we got that far, but we're not. I guess maybe we just need to find a better connection or.
I just dropped my son off to Colorado State in Fort Collins. Every single road has a dedicated bike path
Yeah, and I know that's definitely a project that we identify in the document.
My thought on that is that as a result of COVID, right, it drew people, it pushed people outside to the great outdoors, right? We had, you couldn't find a kayak if you wanted, right? You couldn't find an all-terrain vehicle or a bicycle. We actually sold a bike.
Yeah.
So maybe through that connection, as you know, as a public health, there's a public health component, one, cycling, but as a means of outdoor recreation in times of pandemic, I don't.
Yeah, so let's talk about how we would put that in, right? Because, this is where we got to with the agricultural hub, right? So this thing that we want to create that is an overall plan or philosophy outlined in the POCD, but isn't ready to write a check for this today, right? So what we chose that we've put on this list were things that are like ready to go because of the timeline. So we could recommend a study. Help me get there.
I would think, because it's not like you're going to get this bolus of money all at once. We get, I guess, installments, right? So we get a couple million to go, and then next year we get another couple million. So I think from that perspective, that gives you some time to plan. So I would think you could recommend to the board that they consider these things and how we just have to relate it back to public health, safety, welfare, as it relates to the American Rescue Funds. So I think we just note that these are projects that aren't shovel ready, but could theoretically be accomplished in the next 2 years if energy was put into it.
Right.
With that, there is the corridor study that is now, has gotten underway at a snail's pace, but it has a project number from the DOT, and in that, it's studying Route 161 from, we asked for the high school down to Route 156. DOT said we already analyzed the section at exit 74, the Costco and all of that, so we don't really have to analyze that. We just need to look at the high school section and the section south. So basically, south of 95 all the way to 156. But with that, the intent is that we really want to try to squeeze in a bike lane and a sidewalk for pedestrian traffic alongside the two-lane highway. So hopefully that study can help guide us in doing that, at least in that location. But there's other locations in town. We had some love study that Peter Manuti's group helped put together. Had a series of kind of conceptual walking paths that extended from Route 1 kind of down to Midway Plaza and Society Road, and theoretically, if the sidewalk was to continue around the pond, you could make this big loop and actually make it to 156.
We have some from the COG too, right? There's a regional bike
It is a regional bike
plan. Okay. Okay. So if this group is comfortable, we can make that addition, and if you're comfortable with Gary and I doing a little research to create appropriate wording around that recommendation. Yes? Yeah, nods. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else from this group?
As a side note, on number 7, the solar panel idea, you might just throw in the town landfill as a good potential site.
I remember that we discussed that, and then I think that we discussed about what happened in Hartford with runoff due to that. And we discussed like priority for putting these projects on impervious surfaces. Does anyone recall that part of the discussion? Gary, you might.
vaguely, but I know in Hartford when they put it on the landfill up there, they had some issues with the turf. And I think because it was a synthetic turf, it was sliding or moving, panels were shifting. Whether, and again, that was 10, 15 years ago, I think when that project got built, so maybe between now and then the technology improved. I think we could recommend it as a site that needs to be investigated
Okay.
further. It's vacant land, it's just sitting there. So in that regard, I think, yeah, what can we use it for? In talking with our Natural Resources Commission, they had contemplated an area for dirt bikes and 8 alternate vehicles as opposed to our state forest, the pond property, which is seeing increased use of those vehicles where we don't want them. So is there a place that we can provide a public space for that type of thing? That's low maintenance and zero cost to the town,
Yeah.
or little cost.
I've seen that elsewhere on closed landfills. All right, so I will note the landfill in here. Worth looking into. Any other discussion? All right, I want to be mindful of our time. So what I'm asking this group for is even just a quick vote on the content of this list and approval from this subcommittee for Gary and I to handle a communication to the Board of Selectmen, which includes this content. Does anyone want to
So moved.
move that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Great. So Gary and I will work on that, and then our next meeting is in November. And I know where we had left off was kind of some work going through each section to try to identify our priorities section by section, and the Board of Selectmen had also kind of asked for overall priorities, and we did talk about identifying projects that were underway or on the simpler side to implement. So we'll work to create that in a more formalized document. Additionally, we have some communications out to zoning to get on their agenda, which I know has been a to-do list item for a while. And hopefully within the week, we'll have that communication go out to the other boards and commissions that we talked about at our last meeting. Gary's going to reach out to them and kind of ask for a status update now that we had met with all of them, really, except zoning, to initially introduce the plan, to kind of get a status update on what they might be working on and how we can help facilitate or support that. So with that, any other general items of discussion? Okay. Does anyone want to move to adjourn this POCD subcommittee meeting?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Rich. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Great. None opposed. Thank you. Oh.